Om Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakareshu Sarvada. Om Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Shrim Hrim Shrim Om Shrim Hrim Klim Glom Gam Ganapate Varavarada Sarvajanam Meva Shamanaya Swaha. Om Shrim Hrim Klim Glom Gam Ganapate Varavarada Sarvajanam Meva Shamanaya Swaha. Om Shrim Hrim Shrim Om Shrim Hrim Klim Glom Gam Ganapate Varavarada Sarvajanam Meva Shamanaya Swaha. Om Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Om Shri Atmane Namaha. Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha. Om Sarvamangala Mangalle Shive Sarvartha Sadike Sharanye Trambake Gauri Narayani Namostu Te. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Shri Sadguru Bhyo Namaha. Well, welcome to Daily Satsang. We are continuing our contemplation on the Vivek Chudamani, and along those lines we are examining a variety of different angles through which we can try to understand this extraordinary scripture and its hidden meaning. There are quite a few number of different meanings that are illustrated here. So yesterday we were talking about the sadhana that is called Sham, and that Sham, we'll get back into that in just a moment here. Let me see if I can hold on one moment. Okay, let's see where we are here. So in the Vivek Chudamani, the sadhana that is known as Sham was described in verse number 22. Again, this is a tricky thing to realize because our mind does not allow us that easily to see the limitations and the defects that are present in various types of experiences. So the direct barometer, the direct way to detect the defect is to see if there is any kind of pain, suffering, or energy imbalance that is occurring within ourselves, and that is a direct indication. So there are many examples of this in life. In our day-to-day existence, we have fear at times. We are uncertain at times. We have so many different types of emotional states, mental states. But through those mental states, if we probe carefully, we will see that somewhere along the line, the mind is not in a state of sham, which is calmness. If the mind our internal reality is extremely steady, then in that steadiness, there is high energy available. See, steadiness is not dullness. Steadiness is where there is great integrated energy available, and then one can rest in contemplation. The contemplative process begins only when the mind is really steady. But that's the problem. Mind doesn't tend to be steady. It's being pulled all the time in so many different ways. Our own internal desires keep pulling us. Go after this, do this. It just goes on like that. There doesn't seem to be any end to this, and there really isn't any end to it until the Atma is realized. There's no end to the cravings of the mind, the cravings of the brain, the wanting different stimuli again and again and again and again of all different kinds. There's no end to that. And we can see that there's no end to it. There are many examples. Individuals who are, let's say, pursuing a business. Okay, so you have, let's say, a certain level of success. But then you'll notice in most people, the internal satisfaction that I'm okay, this is enough, this is good enough, or everything is all right. That sense of satisfaction is called Purnakam Bhav in Vachanamrut. That sense of satisfaction is missing in most people. Because when you reach a certain goal, the mind immediately projects to set a new goal to go further. So, for example, if I have one store, or if I have one gas station, or one this, or one, I don't know, whatever the business is, it doesn't matter. You get to a certain point, then the desire erupts to get to the next point, increase it, right? I'm not criticizing it. Sachin is not criticizing that. I have experienced that myself in many different ways in my own life, and sometimes in harmful ways, particularly with my history of the gambling stuff that I had gone through. That's a prime example. And I'm actually creating an extensive series of books and recordings on that to try to illustrate that further. But the fact of the matter is that when we get what we want, the satisfaction is for a short time, and we want more of that again. And usually to our detriment, and that's the problem. It doesn't mean that one should not expand one's business or one should not expand one's career. Yes, those desires are natural. But is it possible to expand through a sense of satisfaction? See, I think that hidden in this verse, there is something that is not directly written here, but it's hidden inside. And that is that the sense of satisfaction is where the contemplation occurs, but through the contemplation, one still continues to progress in life in many different areas without causing disturbance to the mind. So I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but I hope it does. Because we cannot live in this life without desire. We are always going to have some desire to progress further, to go further, some motivating forces there. But it is possible to take that desire and transmute it, change it fundamentally, so that it begins to rest in contemplation. Niyata avastha. It's an avastha. Avastha means state. It's a state where it is contemplating silently, carefully, and then performing all activity without getting pulled in any direction, and still goals can be set for further development. But when goals are set for further development in the material world or in any kind of activity, those goals are set without damaging the stability of the mind. You see, this is a very key concept, and I don't know that it's been expressed that in that way many times. Generally, we think of progress while you're just running after things, but it doesn't have to be. Progress can occur while the mind is very steady, but then the question becomes, what's the motivation? What's the motivation to do anything if you're already in that great steady state? Will you be motivated to even do anything? See, this is the question. Well, in fact, yes, you would be motivated, but the motivation isn't coming from the individualized ego. That's the difference. The individualized ego that is running after the objects of the senses and running after experiences, it only gets brief glimpses of satisfaction when it gets what it wants to the extent that it wants it. So if Sachin wants something to happen, take that gambling example again, just because it's easy to understand. Sachin makes a bet, does something or other, and gets the result. So then the satisfaction is there. Okay, yes, this feels good, because your desire was there, you got what you wanted, you're satisfied, there's a thrill, there's an excitement, you go home. But then what happens? How long does that satisfaction last? It lasts only 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, one day, 2 days, and then before you know it, the desires erupt again and you want to be back in that loop again. Why? Why does that happen? And that's just true with anything in life in general, but this gambling example is easy to understand, and I have experienced it myself on many occasions in the past, because when the realization of the Atma is not there, the mind is going to seek all kinds of stimuli. It happens with like this binge watching in Netflix. It happens with anything that one is getting more and more stimulation with, and then the individual just keeps running after it, even if it's the same old pattern. The patterns are the same. For example, these Bollywood movies, as an example. And I'm not criticizing anybody. I have no intention to criticize. I'm just trying to point out what this verse is trying to say. That if you watch 10 movies or 20, 30, what are the stories? They're the same stories, basically. There's not all that much difference in them, but again, different, some new angle, some new actor, and we're trying to find something new all the time in the Prakriti. in general, inside the experiences of the senses. Yes, there is something new in some sense, but actually it's not all that new. It's the same thing that's repeated again. Take the news that comes on, or take a lot of the new movies that are made. The themes are the same. Now more graphics are there, more technology is there. If you go to a movie theater these days, you find that there's so much high technology that's used in creating these movies. The level of stimulation is so high. So because of the higher level of stimulation with these extreme theaters and more sound and more graphics and all kinds of animations, and it is such a massive stimulation, so mind gets conditioned to that. Eventually they'll probably have something where it's all 3D theaters. You'll feel like you're part of the actor or something, and they'll do something more even beyond that. It goes on further and further and further, right? There's no criticism. That is the way Prakriti evolves itself. But the fact of the matter is, if you want to realize the Atma, the hyper stimulation further and further and further, one has to see, is that causing energetic damage? Is it causing crazy dreams? Is it causing out of control spending of money, let's say? Is it causing us to become angry with others and to damage the psychological purity? We have to ask these questions genuinely. This is not something that we just read from this Vivek Chudamani or from Vachanamrut and this is all something very good. No, it's not like that. It's very good, but what is happening really, genuinely? And then it goes back to the ego. Why this state of contemplation is not there? Because the individualized psychological ego does not ever want to perceive the doshas, dosha drishtaya, the ability to perceive the doshas. It doesn't want to perceive that. It looks at those doshas as best friends. For example, I'll just use my own example. I don't need to go far. That if I cannot see the dosha in the gambling activity, which happened many years back, if I cannot see that again and again, as time goes on, you never know what the mind can do. It can go right back to that again. Because that's the way the desires work. It works like that because of the memory of the experience that activity gave. And that's true with so many other things in life also. So the mind tends to revert back again to past euphoria, things that have made us feel good. So for example, even people who run, let's say, they run regularly and all that, it makes you feel good. It's good for your body. So there's healthy pleasure, healthy kind of euphoria, no problem. But the kind of euphoria that comes with harm within it, where there's fear, there's agitation, there's uncertainty, there's high risk, that kind of euphoria tends to even be higher. It's quick, fast euphoria. You see people who shoot heroin and drugs and things like that, or who are stealing, let's say, embezzlement, crime. All those things do generate this euphoria. But that euphoria comes at a very big cost. What is the biggest cost from a spiritual point of view? That it prevents the resting in contemplation. It absolutely prevents a person from seeing the dosha drishti. It prevents from seeing the fault within it. The damage within it, the harm within it. It doesn't allow one to see that. And then even if a person is able to see that, even if a person is able to see again and again the faults and defects, which is good, if that individual does not go to the next step here, that is niyata avastha, that resting in contemplation of one's goal, of the higher reality, if that doesn't happen, then one will just give in to the force of desire, and that'll be the end of it. Then one will just be in that whole realm of activity, trying to gain the kind of outcome that the individual wants. So this is the whole sansara is trapped in this. Sansara is running after three things: kanchan, kamini, kirti. The kanchan is the financial strength, kamini is the Stri Purusha Asakti, and the third thing that is running after is status and position and power. Yahi teen baat hai. Whole sansar is running after these things, and we are also in the sansar. But even while we're in the midst of the whole population that is running after these three things, we have to still be able to find a way out of that while living in the sansar with a certain amount of interaction, certain amount of distance. We have some interaction, certain amount of distance, and then from that to realize what the Atma is. So that is why our basic needs, our good environment, having some savings, having some, just a stability, so that the highest purpose of life can be realized. Otherwise one will simply be caught inside the pursuit of more and more stimulation, and that will cause damage. It damages the brain, it damages the mind, it damages energy, damages relationships, damages everything. The amount of damage done by about 90% of the stuff that's on all this YouTube and Netflix and Facebook and this and that. There's so much of this hyper stimulation, and that whatever we are connected with is what's going to remain inside. So, for example, I mentioned this before. Let's say if somebody watches like a whole 7-part series on Netflix on something or other. Yes, it may be worth watching. It might be very good for us, maybe. But if it's just a regular, so it's like a series of various family problems and all those kinds of things going on, yes, so it's a mixture of Rajogun, Sattvagun, Tamogun. It's a mixture because we already have that mixture. We resonate with that, and we are adding to that mixture. That's all. So whatever we watch, let's say, just as an example, if I watch 7 seasons of a particular series, all those actors, the story, and the whole thing is then recorded inside my mind. Now, I'm not even criticizing that. Look, I mean, if you want to watch it and you want to see that's what's going to happen, but the question is that going to take us towards the Atma? And the answer is no. It is not going to take us towards the Atma. It will probably create much further blockage, and it will cause rebirth again and again and again and again. That's what will happen. The cause of rebirth is what we are inputting inside our mind. That's the way it goes. I mean, take my own example. I'm not even looking at anybody else. In many years back, for about 2 or 3 years, I had engaged in the whole gambling thing. Because those memories are there, unless I can evolve out of that, if there's even some force of that still remaining, that will cause rebirth. It will cause rebirth to re-experience that whole thing again, and all the confusions that go behind it. So one has to be careful that whatever past experiences we have, can we look at them in a new way, and then at the same time gain wisdom, then do what Shankaracharya ji is saying here. That is to rest in contemplation, restfully, restfully, clearly, with taking enough time to contemplate on oneself, on what's happening in one's life. It's the biggest thing and biggest solution to human problems. And then from that contemplation, this great steadiness comes about. That's the goal here. So when he uses the word swalakshe niyatavastha manasah, manasah sham uchyate. So the resting of the mind again and again on that supreme goal, then that is what will lead to the realization of the Atma. Yes, one still continues the interaction with the objects of the senses to some extent, by recognizing the chaos that is created. See again, virajya vishaya vratad, the chaos that is generated inside. In any situation, like in my own situation in the past, I know exactly what this means as far as the gambling stuff was concerned. Because it generates a great deal of energetic. I've experienced that through that particularly, and some other things also. That this is a matter of experience. We have to recognize and genuinely see this is happening inside of me, right? Whatever it is, it could be chaos of all different kinds. So many possibilities are there. Now, the difficulty that comes about, does it mean that we just cut off from all sense objects? No. One has to have viveka. Again, the word viveka is how much to interact, what to interact. Is that interaction of the objects of the senses, is it taking us towards the Atma? Is it allowing us to move and develop further and further? Otherwise, it is very difficult to even recognize the chaos. And what will happen? Human beings are constantly trying to regain the lost energy from that chaos. And and look, there's no question. Each person who is running after the sense objects is looking for the highest level of experience of that object. For example, if you want to buy a new car, let's say somebody can afford a $30,000 car. But when they go inside, they go into the showroom, they look at all those other cars also that are 50,000, 80,000, high class, and they say, wow, it would be nice if I had that. Wow. Everybody wants the highest quality of the sense objects. Is it true or not? If you were to ask the average person, do they want the highest quality car, the multi-million-dollar home, best quality of friends, best health, best of everything, the highest of everything, going into these exotic tours and having private jets. What else is there? Maybe even having your own spaceship in the future that you can go to. You can travel to different planets. Okay, then what? Let's assume you have all that. The fact of the matter is that even if a person gets to all that, in our ancient scriptures, they used to say that the kings were Chakravarti Raja. Chakravarti Raja means what? The king of the whole world. But many of these kings, they went into the forest to discover the Atma. They realized that even if I become the king of the whole world, I am still slave to this sansar and to the problems of the world. And I cannot find infinite happiness that way. That's why in the history of India, most of the stories are of the kings who have went into the forest. Look at all the scriptures. Bhagwan Ram is a king, Krishna is a king. Then you've got the whole series of individuals who were kings. They went into the forest. Now there were of course gurus and rishis who were not kings. That's a different class of people. But the fact is that all I'm trying to say is that if you get to the highest of the high experience, staying in the best hotels and staying and taking the best cruises and moving in that one, it's a beautiful life. Who can deny that? True. But then what? Does that mean you've discovered the Atma? No. And it doesn't mean that, and not only that, there's every chance of getting saturated in those experiences, and then eventually a lot of those people who are at that height of material experience, they turn to alcohol, to drugs, they turn to doing extreme things, they turn to gambling, they turn to hypersexuality, they turn to those things, and then they wind up destroying and damaging their life, and many of them have committed suicide. Now that's not going to happen with everybody. I think that needs to be clear that doesn't happen with everyone, but it is what happens when one tries to go further and further and further. Yes, you can get to high levels of excellence. There's no doubt in the material world. But the question ultimately becomes, can one get to those stages while remaining very steady internally and not get drawn into the vortex of the sansar while one is progressing further? Is that possible? Well, yes, it is possible. It is possible because we do need to progress further in life in many different ways, but to progress with great steadiness. So if the progress happens, fine. If it doesn't happen or limited happens, fine. Your happiness, your internal realization of the Atma is not disturbed at all. Come what may. That is the real Brahma Vidya. That is actually the Bhagavad Gita living inside the person. We say we want to read the Gita. We want to study the Gita. We want to study Brahma Vidya. But when Brahma Vidya starts living inside, the first thing that happens is that the mind is extremely steady. That is Sham. That is exactly what this word is referring to here. That when Shankaracharya ji is saying that that is a state of Sham, it means that you've come to a state of intense steadiness, great steadiness. And through that steadiness, all the wisdom comes. Through that steadiness, what are the right steps to take for further progression without getting getting into high risk situations and acting just emotionally and acting impulsively. No. Because, ultimately, people who do high risk things, sometimes they make high risk investments in businesses or even in stock markets and other things like that. High risk. Yeah, you can get a payout that's really high, or you can get, or you lose that. So then you're day and night thinking. You see people they're looking at the stock market day and night. Many retired people are doing just that. They have some amount of money and they're day and night shuffling those dollars in different ways, and then the whole life is finished that way. To some extent, obviously, those things are needed in life. But how much? And do we want to finish the rest of our life doing that only? I mean, in my own case, thank God all that gambling thing stopped. But in my own case, I mean, I know people. I used to work with in the addictions field also. That there are people who just their whole life is just that. They don't know anything else. They don't want to know. They want to be in the casinos. They want to be drinking. They want to want those stimulation. They come home. They might even not eat properly. All they're interested in is just staying in that environment. Nothing else. There's people who are just day and night playing with the stock market. That's it. That's the 99% of their thought is just that only. There are people who are thinking only of certain kinds of stimulative experiences like sexuality and whatnot. Sometimes they're thinking about that, like people who have sex addictions and all that. I met one individual some years back, had spent $25,000 on internet pornography and all. Unbelievable stuff. But amount of money that is spent in alcohol, massive amounts of money sometimes is spent. Limited is one thing. Buying more and more expensive drinks and whatnot. All of this thing becomes a serious problem psychologically. It becomes a serious problem societally. Society is being damaged and crushed by this. The drug trade that is there, the opiate addictions that are there. All these things are serious problems in the worldwide, and the solution is right here in this verse number 22. To all of this, A to Z, the solution is here. You name any human problem, the solution is here. Because each human being has to be responsible and awakened enough, starting with me. I'm not even telling anybody else. I have to make sure I do this first. That I must be able to see clearly what is that dosha drishtaya in the vishayas. If I cannot see that, if I don't want to see that, if I'm not able to see that, then I have a long way to go. Then there's every chance of getting stuck in God knows how many more lifetimes, rebirth upon rebirth, and not to mention the pain and suffering and difficulty that one gets over here. You see, so as an example, there are psychological impacts on the way money comes to us. Think about it this way. If a person, let's just say person number A, steals money from someone, chori kehte hain na, chori. What is the impact on the mind? Yes, the money, $500 is there, but इसमें बहुत negative impact होता है because you're creating an energy cord with that individual, and there's a karmic effect, and that energy, that $500 caused pain to somebody else. You have to experience God knows how much pain. The person who stealing. You see, this is what happens. This is an example, and this is so. The same thing is true. Same thing is true when we are hurting somebody with our words. When we use language in such a way, somebody is hurt emotionally. So, you know what happens in that situation? That pain that person experienced, the individual who caused it also has to experience that. That's the way it goes. That's the law of karma. That's what you put out is what you're going to get back. And that's the way it goes. So how energy comes to us, what we put out and what we get, the way that it is obtained and the way that we are expressing it has everything to do with this one word here, that is dosha drishtaya. So looking at, seeing where the defects are. and then the problems that will be experienced by the jiva because of that. It's not easy. It's not easy to understand these things, because in every step of the way, one has to be on guard that where is my energy coming, and how am I giving it away. The same thing is true in relationship, like intimate relationships and husband-wife relationships and all that. When there are arguments and fights and all these terrible things that are going on there, the problem is that there's so much ego, there's so much battle, there's so much imperfection. That's why a family needs to sit for meditation together. Sit together, eat together, stay together, pray together, love each other together, all of that, so that one begins to not focus on each other's faults. See, dosha drishta, one begins to see through the process of observation one's own defects. And if I can see my own defect as a defect, if I can see what's happening within me as a defect, as a deficiency, as a need for further progression, the moment I start doing that, then I will eventually reach that state where of being able to contemplate on what is the Atma, and then allow the Satsang ideas to filter completely inside, to hold them inside, and then the mind is then applied towards the Svalaksha, that is the Paramatma, that is God actually. The Laksha, that is the goal. Then that will happen. Until then, there is just a vortex like situation going on. The ups and downs and pulling and back and forth. It happens all the time. In relationship, you have a love-hate relationship. People have a love-hate relationship with alcohol. Same thing. They love it so much, but then they suffer from it. They are damaged by that. So these love-hate relationships are there throughout the sansar. And that is why when we go too close to any experience in the sanskar, in the sansar, we begin to dislike it. Too much familiarity even with somebody is not necessary. It's not necessary that we should be too familiar with anybody in life. Yeah, we have family and friends and all that. Okay, it's okay to some extent. But what we need to be familiar with is the Atma and the Paramatma. That familiarity is paramount. Other familiarity, what that will give us, too much entrapment in somebody else's life is not going to take us towards that Atma, towards that realization. It will bind us further and further. So resting in contemplation rather than trying to find ultimate rest in the samsara is the point here. These are big ideas. There's every solution to every human problem is here, and also living life happily balanced in a very good way in this samsara is also shown here. So that's the way it goes. It has a lot to do with also, there's one more point I want to make. When good things are going on in life, when there is good development going on, one has to be very careful not to sabotage that. Good health is there, you have good enough money coming, you have good friends, good family, everything, there's good environment. Make the most of it, don't sabotage it, and move towards the Atma. A person who doesn't use the best quality of circumstance, Desh Kal Kriya Sang, Mantra Shastra Diksha Dhyan, there's 8-fold of these things written in Vachanamrut. If we have them, everything is good in the right place. And then if we don't take that opportunity to contemplate on the Atma, then we're wasting our life completely. It's just a waste. That's what Shankaracharya ji uses stronger language. He says a person is committing suicide again and again. So when good things are there, good development is there, time is there, a good environment is there, go for the Atma, to realize the Atma and the Paramatma. And on that basis, one can then open, because when the door opens into the Atma, my God, that is the most amazing thing. There is nothing like that linkage. Isme purna sadhuta hai, isme bahut divyata hai. And that divinity increases and grows further and further. And all of this that I'm trying to express is just a way of trying to explain further these ideas. There are so many YouTube videos by great saints also that explain the Vivek Chudamani in probably much more detail. We don't have time to go through all that here on a daily basis, but we can watch it on our own. What I'm going to do in the next couple of months, I'll be creating a whole list of all the reference videos, reference materials that connect with everything that I'm trying to talk about here also in terms of the Vivek Chudamani. So that way, in the future, if people are really interested in going further in this and actually realizing the Atma, then what is involved in that? It's one thing to hear somebody talk. It's another thing to really get into the reality of it and to realize that. So that is what we want, and that can happen. All right, so we'll continue tomorrow.